You have
Yeah.
been involved in politics for many years, Jewish politics specifically.
Well, and not, not solely Jewish politics, but
Well,
politics in general.
right. I mean, well, you were what was it? The Jewish board of the
So I was on the
campaign or
President's
something.
Council. Well, so I was on the President's Council for Republican Jewish Coalition back in the 90s when
That's what it
Newt
was.
Gingrich took over, and into the mid 2000s. I was the executive director of the Jewish outreach for the reelection of President Bush in 2004. And if you really want to get technical, it really wasn't Bush Cheney. It was through the auspices of RPOF, which was the Republican Party of Florida. But they sort of outsourced it to us, and there was a whole team of us. So I was the executive director, but you're only as good as the people that are around you. It was absolutely a team effort, and we worked together, ate together, lived together, cried together, and fought together, and ultimately we had a good outcome in 2004. That's for sure. Because up until President Trump, I would tell you that George W. Bush was the best friend that Israel had as a U.S. president. Obviously, I think Donald Trump has sort of one-upped him in terms of his support for Israel. But at the time, he was the best friend Israel had in the White House for sure. So making sure he was reelected was an important thing to do. Much like I would argue, not to get into politics, that I think Kamala Harris, if she gets elected, will be the first pro-Hamas president, we're going to have.
So say a little bit about, you mentioned Trump being more pro-Israel than W. Can you say, I'm assuming you're talking about the move of the Capitol or of the,
so the embassy, moving the embassy to Jerusalem is one thing, but the Abraham Accords are groundbreaking.
Talk about that.
I mean, peace. I mean, when Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat, inked their peace deal, that was groundbreaking. But to get the other Arab countries to sign formal peace treaties with Israel, United Arab Emirate, and don't forget, by all understanding, the Saudis were on the verge of signing a peace deal with Israel. And look, I don't know that for a fact. I'm not in the Trump administration. I have no inside knowledge of it, but everything I've read and everyone I've talked to who is on the inside said that was that was the casus belli. That was the reason that Hamas launched the attack when they did, because obviously they're a satellite, lesser than Hezbollah, but they're a satellite of Iran. And really, I mean, Iran really is the head of the dragon in terms of the attacks on Israel. This is all coming through Iran, and it doesn't end until the Iran issue is resolved. So
Robert,
all this, what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you remember? I think we actually covered this when we first started the show. The Biden administration giving $6 billion to Iran.
Well, let's not forget the Obama administration. I think it was $18 billion at night. You remember those pictures of the pallets of money going onto the plane?
Cash.
Not to mention the bolstering of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Right. So, I mean, elections, ladies and gentlemen, do have consequences. And while there may be a deep state and there may be, sort of the what would you call it, administrative state, who's at the top does matter to all of this. So I would argue that peace with Bahrain and peace with the United Arab Emirate was a precursor to peace with Saudi Arabia, which to me would have radically changed the dynamics in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was the reason that the attacks occurred when they did, only now to find out that, the tunnels and the money and all the monies that were being given to the Palestinians weren't used for their people.
Yeah.
They were used to build tunnels, buy munitions, and stockpile weapons, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious at this point. But I would say there are many things that make Donald Trump the most pro-Israel president we've had and the most consequential president we've had in terms of Middle East politics. But first and foremost, it's the Abraham Accords for sure.
And that's, I asked Benjamin to look it up. So UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. And you are correct. They were on the verge of, I think, at least 3 or 4 other peace agreements or like trade agreements. The trade agreements, you guys, are almost the equivalent of a peace agreement. because it means people are willing to do business with one another, and that is huge. So tell me, Robert, when you hear other people who are Jewish talk about
Hmm.
how they don't think politics are important, or they don't want to get involved, or they just kind of are like, I just want to be over here being myself and not get involved. What does that make you think? How do you feel about that?
Angry. Look, let's go back to the summer of 2020. I think what you really have to talk about is the social justice movements, right? So the vanguard of most such social justice movements were, a large proportion were Jewish,
Mm,
right? And when it turned out that these organizations were anti-Semitic, the Jewish community, and mostly the liberal Jewish community, I mean, obviously not the conservative or the Orthodox Jewish community, but the Reformed Jewish community or liberal Jewish community, which is unfortunately the majority of Jews in the country,
mm,
are having this moment of cognitive dissonance, which is, how could these organizations that we supported, that we were there, that we were the vanguard of these parties, how could they turn against us? And what they didn't understand is they were always anti-Semitic. I mean, this whole
mm,
wokeism is sort of a old religion made new, and the Jews were always, I mean, um, what's the term, useful idiots in that
mm,
kind of in that scenario. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in this election. But that's why Israel Appreciation Day becomes so important, because when you saw all these current protests and college kids on campuses, and you ask them what they're protesting, they have no idea. They have no idea what the river to the sea means,
yeah.
right? And honestly, if you go back to the Bible, they're really talking about the Euphrates, but that's a whole different discussion. What the pro Hamas movement, or as I call them, the Death Eaters, right, Death to America,
Yeah.
really are talking about, from the river to the sea. We've talked about this. It's the Jordan River to the Red Sea. And as I've said, I was at a conference, I don't know, early February of this year, and someone said, "Well, why do they hate the Jews?" And I said,
Mm,
"They don't just hate the Jews." I said, "We're the tip of the spear. We're the canary in the coal mine. If they drive us into the sea," and I had to explain to him that's what the river to the sea means.
yeah.
I asked the gentleman, I said, "Are you Christian?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You're next."
Yeah.
I
That
said, "Because
includes
it's
you.
about Judeo-Christian values, and there's an old um, Middle East or Arabic, or really Muslim Middle East proverb that basically says, after Saturday comes Sunday." Right. So, and I will tell you that the Christian community at large has been incredibly supportive of Israel Appreciation Day, because, as a friend of mine said, and he was on the show, Chris Widener, again, one of the leading motivational speakers in the country, if not the world, said, "Robert, we need to stick together because they're coming after both of us. Israel's being attacked from the outside. We're being attacked from the inside."
Yeah.
Right.
And
I
I
mean,
think American Christians have it very easy. We don't deal with persecution here. They don't understand. Most Americans don't know that Christians are being killed all over the globe. They were killed during World War II, just like everybody else. They don't want, the state cannot have any opponents.
well, we talked about it, Erica. There's a genocide going on in Africa right now where the Muslims are killing the Christians. There's a genocide going on in East Asia where the Hindus are being slaughtered by the Muslims. Right. The
Yep.
Chinese are there's a genocide against the Uyghurs. Right. But you never hear about it in the news. And I hate to coin a phrase because it sort of makes my skin crawl a little bit, but there is some truth to it, which is, in terms of U.S. media, no
Yeah.
Jews, no news. Right.
Wow.
And that's a really harsh statement and hard for me to say. But why aren't we covering that?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
is it just about Israel being committing genocide in Gaza, which they're not?
yeah.
I mean, it's not
Oh,
Israel that uses their children or their people as human shields. It's not Israel that calls for the wiping out, whose charter calls for the wiping out of another people. It's not Israel that teaches their children to be suicide bombers.
yeah.
Right. And we've talked about this.
Yeah.
If Hamas, let's say Iran, but if Hamas lays down their arms, there'd be peace. If Israel lays down its arms, there'd be no Israel, right?
There's
I
no
mean,
Israel.
that's it. It's not
Yeah.
that complicated.
And I think what's so fascinating to me has been something that you mentioned, which is the the movement sort of eating itself, right? So
Sure.
I think because Jewish people have been persecuted, they have a tendency to want to be more compassionate to other people, and yet they end up getting kind of mixed up with people who are like, yeah, but I don't like you ultimately.
So,
We're on the same team until the rubber meets the road.
so there's a term called tikkun olam, right? To heal the
Mm,
world, right?
mm,
Which is what we're taught. And I think that term has been, I'm sure there are people who will disagree with it, but I think it has been misinterpreted, right? You're supposed to
mm.
do good deeds. You're supposed to make the world a better place.
Okay.
So the goal is laudable, right? The goal is a good thing. But I can tell you, so being up in New England, was in a temple that was a Reformed synagogue, and that was fine. And I know I'm the conservative there, and that's fine too. And it got to the point where they started to preach sort of this moral equivalence between one man's terrorist as another man's freedom fighter from the
Yeah.
Bema. And I said to the rabbi, I said, look, I come here for spiritual comfort. I come here to be with mishpacha, right, with my family, and regardless, and leave politics at the door, right? But if you're going to preach this kind of thing from the Bema, I can't be here. Right, because
Mm,
that doesn't provide me with spiritual comfort. We're supposed to come together as a community, right? And by
yeah.
the way, bringing this back to Israel Appreciation Day, that's also what we're trying to do here, right?
Yeah.
This is a nonpartisan, interfaith, grassroots event where
Yeah.
people who probably don't agree on a lot of other issues agree that supporting Israel and Israel's right to self-defense and all the things that make Israel special
Yep.
is what we're all coming together to celebrate and to educate, because we want to educate the young people who are going to be back in college campuses come September, right? And just in
Yep.
a week or two from now, or if they're not already back. A lot of my friends are dropping their kids off at college. So this is a really unique thing that's never been done before. And it's a broadcast TV event that's going to be live, undisclosed location, because we did have our venue cancel us several weeks ago when they found out that it was a pro-Israel event.
Wow.
So we decided to take this virtual, and it's going to be even bigger and better. God closes a door, he opens a window. But this is a coming together of people. Let's put aside the things we don't agree on, and let's focus on what we agree on, which is the seminal importance of Israel, not only to the Middle East, but to the Western world, and all the things that this little country the size of New Jersey contributes: rule of law, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right? Freedom of the press, democracy, capitalism, all the medical and technological advances. Israel, our theme is Israel, a modern miracle, which it is, but an ancient hope, which it also
Mm.
is.